Hello everybody, yes, I'm a photographer. I started out in the mid-70s being an accident ambulance man in North London and West London. And when I had my first child and family, we decided that I'd like to move to mid-Wales and not engage with the city. I took my skills as an ambulance man to deal with some of the people that are described in these pictures of what were known as hippies, new age travellers, jippos and assorted scum at the time. And that I wanted to try and use photography to try and challenge the stereotype of the soap dodging wastrel that they were largely represented in the press. So a notion of alternative lifestyle comes about, and to show families, mild-mannered people engaged in alternative lifestyles of different sorts. And of course, politically speaking, it's very hard to offer a nomadic lifestyle. I mean, since the Stone Age, difficulties with the hunter-gatherers and the farmers. And of course, that still pertains to the current days. Travelling around the country from one place to the other, Stonehenge being quite central in the summer solstice to the lifestyle, was an economic answer to some people in Thatcher's Britain at the time. In Norman Tebbett's famous quote, he didn't riot when he couldn't get a job, he got on his bike and he looked for work. And I say that some of the people here are doing exactly that. Next to the economic imperative of being strolling players around the country, politics comes in quite large and famous. And of course, what I've just said about the hunter-gatherers and the farmers right back when still pertains now, that the law and order, that at this time the Tory government were in charge, and they had just been, this is the mid-80s, and just been dealing with the miners' strike. And so us, through trying to do smaller events than this one, but obviously cross it over with some of the commercial events, means that we became very, very politically targeted. I couldn't understand why at the time, but I do now. That I say some of the lifestyle is similar to what, well, similar in motive to what I say the diggers and the levellers would have thought about at the end of the Civil War, of taking back the commons, dealing with, that's one of the reasons we're at the Green Festival, I'll tell you a bit about later on. So the commercial aspect of things that's going around with Glastonbury at the moment is one of the transmogrifications of dealing with the younger generation's view to go out there and have a party. But what I was trying to do with the first pictures was to show an alternative lifestyle rather than what you just do for a weekend and make a mess. In actual fact, with the Green Festival, we've got a project about the greener festival as a notion of how some of the bigger events like this are dealing with that. Plastic bottles, plastic waste of different sorts, and we hope that with the Green Festival, it's not just a festival, it's a way of demonstrating how things can otherwise be, even if it's only a smaller scale job. Different aspects of lifestyle. It's horse-drawn here, obviously drawn on some of the more traditional travellers' ways of doing things. And it is strange to think that some of the offspring of the horse-drawn became some of the front end of the free party and rave scene. I think that was a bit of youthful rebellion to their parents' fiddle playing and general what you would normally expect a gypsy to be represented by. Anyway, Stonehenge is central to the situation, and when the years that I was there, we occupied a field next to the stones and went to visit the stones on the summer solstice. And I think that we've done that for about 6,000 years. But because of politics, that was the Home Secretary's idea, Douglas Hurd at the time, to outlaw New Age travellers, not in this age, not in any age, and so on. And the forces were arranged against us, roughly the same amount of effort as with the miners. This was 1985, when we were on the way to Stonehenge, and a thing called the Battle of the Beanfield took place. It was widely reported in the press at the time. 1,600 policemen, 5 police forces, some military, the parachute regiment put in police uniforms we later discovered in the court cases that followed. And the idea wasn't just the upholding of the High Court injunction, but it was to go out there and smash motors and people and teach them a lesson for their behaviours. And I, with 24 others, took a civil case against the police for this action that you're about to see for the next few slides, and we won. But because of various legal niceties, we got awarded money that was then taken away from us. So we won, but we didn't get anything. But the half costs each meant that the police had to find about £3 million. So they got fined, but we didn't get anything. So there you go. What's new? But this lifestyle suffered this violence, and it turned, instead of the hopeful set of individuals of future thinking and green, environmentalism hadn't been described as a notion at the time, but they were in that mindset, I would say. So anyway, it turned out they just turned into a refugee column, and they weren't very nice people to be with sometimes because of the hurt that had been applied to them. Another generation comes along and invents a thing called the free party scene. The law at the time, with the Public Order Act, said that if 3 people bring with them 12 vehicles and a piece of land for the common purpose of residing there, i.e. criminal trespass, and that's the end of the alternative, then they commit an offence. What if they stay up all night and make a racket? They don't therefore contravene the Public Order Act. And the next thing that happens is Michael Howard invents another law, the Criminal Justice and Public Order Act, to deal with these people by having 20 people in a field listening to music that is characterised by a succession of repetitive beats. And by doing that, if you don't move, then you can be liable to arrest and so on. So it's the Public Order Act and it's the Criminal Justice and Public Order Act to try and deal with the new way of doing things and the community that derives from this. Because of the roadblocks that then took place in the countryside, the reclaim the streets as a notion became apparent. This is crossing over with the protest against the Criminal Justice Act that you can see here, and the Tory party's view about the fact that we shouldn't be protesting. Reclaim the Streets occurred in London, Manchester, Birmingham, all the major cities. Nottingham had 3 or 4, and it was quite a large turnout. So the fact that you can gather together with your friends, listen to music, dealing with the notion of the continual prevalence of road building, the roads that split up communities in the city, and to be able to protest that notion. That's the Derby Road, if you don't recognise where that is, right? Yeah. Obviously there's a lot of people interested in A, the party, but B, the very notion of gathering together and having got those numbers of people together, infecting them with the ideas on how things can otherwise be. And I've always thought that was quite an important notion, because if people are sort of split off into their own little silos, you never get the chance to show positive role models on how things can otherwise work. We were talking earlier about the difficulties of car culture, of the pollution, the air pollution, the manufacturing, the consumption. It's a critique that's quite large, really, and needs more dealing with. And obviously, as the civil emergency of environmental matters progresses, I think there's going to be more people realising that we do have to live with less. We do have to concern ourselves with the transport, food miles, the amount of use that we make, and whatever way that you think you can protest and highlight these issues. I found that although I started my speech by saying that I was concerned with social and medical situations, I have to say that over time I've developed camera work to try and show something about opposition, and that by doing so I've been the subject of, I should say about 8,000 pictures of being photographed. I know this because I have a significant number of pictures of them photographing me. And it turns out that, of course, I later belonged to the National Union of Journalists. I have a press card, and I therefore have a legitimate reason for being at some of these events, to obviously tell the public more of what it is that I'm discovering. But those people with a social conscience who worry about attending matters like this, I say that half of the surveillance exercise isn't to try and find people that are engaged in wrongdoing. It is to scare the bejeebers out of you in case that you might do, and intimidate people from attending things. I'm showing you some now just a general police work of different aspects that I've covered, and emergency service work that I've covered as a journalist. And so the photography is not just about sticking up for the alternatives, it is being a jobbing news photographer. And coming from an ambulance background, I'm particularly interested in snaps like that to try and describe how people are dealt with at scenes. That's St James's Street, isn't it? And that's Holm Pier Point. Yes, fires are always fairly dramatic for pictures, you have to say that, you know. Which I thought should go next to that. That's the Ratcliffe power station, and speaking environmentally, I've always thought that that was our immediate problem, from those that think we can deal with raising awareness about climate issues, and that people go from one end of the country to complain about aspects, whether it's roads, whether it's power. But Ratcliffe is right on our doorstep, and those of us that come from a greeny, more credential feel as though we should be doing much more about highlighting the issue of the fuel that it uses. There's no such thing as clean coal. Mr. Trump would think that there's clean coal, doesn't he? But I'm telling you, there's no such thing. Policemen are in an invidious position about all of this, you see, because the policemen can get gassed by poisonous air and climate change and all the rest of it, as well as the rest of us. They have children, they have families, they have responsibilities, and yet the law puts people like this in the dock to defend, rather than being able to find the concept of ecocide, which puts a company in the dock to defend its actions, because in law we can't get sufficient evidence to say that the Exxon Mobil created a hurricane in Houston. I mean, there's no causal link, so therefore you can't put the relevant case in court. Assorted union matters, about pensions, teachers, you've seen the fire service up in arms. Assorted public workers. Crowds always make great pictures, don't you think? Bit of an antidote. I mean, some of the things that us journalist types do, we get to photograph people being silly. Sometimes it's a bit of a skill not to look too professional, as though you're just a jobbing tourist passing by, and you get better reaction sometimes, I feel. Reenactment has always been quite a big thing for me. This is a Georgian army about to take on Napoleon at Bulletin Hall. It's completely amazing they managed to hit anything, really, isn't it, at those times. I went off about the levellers and and the diggers. And of course this is the Sealed Knot Society doing in Cromwell's army. It's only between then, in the middle of the 17th century, and the other ones, which was the middle of the 18th century, wasn't it? I mean, the weaponry doesn't seem to have moved that much. It's only more recently that it's been a bit more deadly than it is. Remembrance has always been quite a big thing to me, I have to say as well. I made a series of photographs of some of the older chaps, because I don't think they're going to be here an awful lot longer. And I think it's important to try and note their service, really. No, they fell apart, making them stand there in that sort of order. It was quite unusual. I put in Ashbourne, mob football, Shrovetide football. Don't know if anybody's ever been to that, mate. It's another. I put it there because it's another cultural event with mass attendance, where people have done this since the 11th century. But there's a health and safety issue now, which means it might need to be banned. I got to see them try, really, but I've taken various photographers along in the past, haven't I?
Yeah.
And there's loads of violence, but there's no animosity, and if you can keep your sea legs under that sort of condition, then you can do some of the public order stuff that I was trying to show earlier on, mate. I'm quite big on my multicultural bits in Nottingham. There's the Sikhs, St George's Day, St Patrick's Day, Chinese New Year. There's quite regular ones in the calendar that I've got to grips with over the course of the summer events, like to try and show the different ways that we have a notion of community style, what it is that we do when we come together as these humans. We are really quite varied, and I think it's a thing that a photographer can do to try and illustrate this. And of course now we come to the Carnival, which started out as Nottingham's Afro-Caribbean Carnival, but we just call it the Carnival now. And all of the aspects of music and attendance that I've tried to show before are now managed rather than a few years ago there was a thing called rock and reggae that used to appear on the forest ground, where there wasn't any management, there's no fence around it, there's no concern for safety and all the rest of it. Like, people just came, did it and went away again. But now with the Carnival, I have the impression that the local authority really, rather, it wasn't there, to be quite honest, that they've taken it away from the centre of town, and now it's down by the embankment on the ground down there, and to not show your cultural feathers through the middle of town to try and engage people, I think is well, it's lamentable, and it should be otherwise, really. But they're so frightened of black youth to some extent because of stories on the news and things, so they try and maintain a field with knife arches and all the rest of it. And then you leave that event, come into the middle of town, and there's black youth. Are we frightened of them as well? Like, I mean, I think it's. I think they're wrong about the management of events, as you probably tell from what I was showing at the early part of the scene. Chinese New Year. There used to be a large event down at the lakeside. But it turns out that stopped now, and we did it the week before Chinese New Year in the Market Square, so I don't quite understand that either. That's the end of that bit.